My name is Alex Rivers and I'm 44 years old. I live in Seattle where I work as a financial analyst for a large international corporation. On the surface, life was perfect, everything I could have asked for. My wife, Lindsay, is a former school teacher who decided to stay home with our 2 kids when they were born. She had always been a caring and attentive mother, so it made sense that she'd focus all her energy on them. Meanwhile, I worked long hours, providing stability and a comfortable life for our family. We lived in a cozy home in a quiet neighborhood, and for a long time, that was enough. Looking back, everything about our life together seemed almost picture-perfect. We had a rhythm, a balance. The kids were healthy, Lindsay was a fantastic mom, and our relationship was built on years of companionship, love, and trust. We had a house with a yard, 2 cars in the driveway, and more than enough to make ends meet. We were just an ordinary family, but we had everything we needed. But all that changed after one photo. A single image, so small and fleeting, shook the foundation of everything I thought I knew about my wife. It happened by accident. Liam, our eldest, had been on his tablet as usual, scrolling through one of his school group chats. I wasn't paying attention to what he was doing, just trying to finish some work after a long day. But then I caught a glimpse of something that made my stomach drop. It was a photo, just a quick flash on his screen, but it was enough. I instantly recognized Lindsay in the picture. She had been at a company retreat with her firm, and I was on the list of invited guests, just as the spouse of one of the employees. But Lindsay had forgotten that little detail, apparently. She had completely overlooked the fact that I was also included in the event. The photo wasn't just a casual picture from a company retreat. It was something far more in asterisk mate than that. Lindsay was standing close to a man I didn't recognize. His arm was around her waist, pulling her in. Her face was inches from his, and there was an undeniable closeness in the way they stood. What made it even worse, though, was the fact that she was holding a fork with a piece of cake on it, hovering it in front of his mouth like they were feeding each other. It looked like something you'd see in a rom-com or on a date, definitely not something that should be happening at a corporate event with colleagues. I couldn't stop staring at the image. My mind raced as I tried to process what I was seeing. Was this some kind of joke? A moment captured in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was it something else entirely? I had no answers, only the gnawing feeling in my gut that told me something wasn't right. I tried to tell myself that I was overreacting, that maybe I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The rest of the night, I couldn't shake the image from my head. I walked around in a daze, doing the usual family routines, dinner, helping the kids with homework, reading them bedtime stories, but I felt disconnected from it all. The world seemed distant. My mind kept returning to that picture, to the way Lindsay was smiling so effortlessly at this man, so carefree and engaged. I had never seen her act like that with any of her colleagues, not like that. I wasn't sure if it was the way he looked at her or the way she looked back, but something about it made my blood run cold. It was a look of comfort, of an asterisk Macy that didn't belong in a professional setting. By the time the kids were in bed, I had made up my mind. I had to ask her about it. But how? How could I bring it up without sounding crazy? I couldn't just say, "Hey, I saw this photo of you and some guy feeding each other cake. What's going on?" It felt ridiculous, childish even, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My instincts were screaming at me that I needed answers, that this was a turning point in our relationship. I waited until later that evening after the kids had fallen asleep. Lindsay and I were sitting in the living room, watching TV. She was curled up on the couch next to me, flipping through her phone. I wasn't sure how to broach the subject. It felt like everything was riding on the next few words I spoke. I didn't want to come across as accusatory, but the tension in my chest felt suffocating. I casually asked, "How was the retreat, honey?" Lindsay smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. "It was great. A lot of team-building activities, some downtime to relax. You know, the usual. Nothing crazy." "Nothing crazy, huh?" I said, trying to keep my tone light. "I saw a photo from the retreat today. It looked pretty fun." She raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting the conversation to go there. "A photo? What are you talking about?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure how to continue. But I had to push forward. "It's a picture of you with some guy at the retreat. You two were really close. It looked like you were feeding each other cake." Her expression changed instantly. The smile faded from her face, and her eyes narrowed just slightly, as though she was trying to read my tone. She didn't say anything at first, just brushed her hair back behind her ear. Finally, she let out a small laugh. "Oh, that? It was just a silly team-building thing. Everyone was doing it. You know how these corporate events are. I can't believe you're making such a big deal out of it, Alex. You're overthinking things, as usual." I was shocked by her reaction. Felt so dismissive, so effortless. As if she had been prepared for me to ask and had already come up with an explanation. A silly team-building thing? I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. Lindsay, you were really close to that guy. It didn't look like just a silly game. I mean, you were... Alex, she interrupted, her tone now sharp. Please, it was nothing. I'm telling you, it was just a stupid little game. You're making this into something it's not. Trust me. Okay? It's harmless. You're overreacting, as usual. Her words hit me like a slap. I wanted to argue, to tell her that I wasn't overreacting, that I wasn't imagining things, but I couldn't get the words out. The more she spoke, the more I began to doubt myself. Was I just being paranoid? Was I reading too much into this? But deep down, a small voice kept telling me that I wasn't, that something had changed, that this photo, this image I had seen was a turning point in our marriage. The conversation ended with her brushing it off, assuring me that everything was fine, and that I was being ridiculous. But I couldn't forget what I had seen. The doubt lingered, gnawing at me in a way that I couldn't ignore. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling. The image of her with that man burned into my mind. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe that everything was fine. But in my gut, I knew something had shifted. And no matter how much she tried to dismiss it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of uncovering something that would change everything. The days that followed felt different. Even though Lindsay had dismissed my concerns with that fake smile and her usual "you're overthinking it" line, something in me had changed. I began to see our life together through a different lens. Every little thing, every action that seemed ordinary before, now felt loaded with suspicion. I remember the first time I caught myself overthinking. It was a few days after the conversation about the photo, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, reading through some reports for work. Lindsay was in the living room with the kids, but her phone, usually left lying around, was now nowhere to be found. Struck me as odd. She had always kept it on the counter, face up, like it was just another part of the room. But now, it was gone. I brushed it off, telling myself I was being ridiculous, but it felt like the first sign that things weren't quite as they seemed. I tried to shake off the feeling. But then, one evening, I asked her if she wanted to have a family night, like we used to. A movie, pizza, and just some quality time with the kids. It had been a while since we'd done something like that. I missed it. We used to have these spontaneous nights, laughing at cheesy movies and letting the kids stay up a little later than usual. But when I suggested it, her response was quick and dismissive. Maybe another time, Alex. I've got a lot of work to catch up on, she said, her voice strangely tight. I could hear the familiar hum of her laptop being opened from the other room. You know how it is. I didn't push her. I never do. But that feeling in my stomach grew, gnawing at me every time I looked at her. It was like there was a wall between us, one that hadn't been there before. And every time I tried to reach for her, to reconnect, she pulled away just a little bit more. That wasn't the only thing. There was also the shopping. Lindsay had always been someone who preferred comfort over style, baggy sweatshirts, jeans, and sneakers. We weren't living in the lap of luxury, but we had what we needed. But suddenly, it seemed like she was splurging on things she didn't need: new outfits, expensive shoes, bags that made no sense for a stay-at-home mom. The first time I noticed, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe she wanted to treat herself. But then it happened again and again. She would come home with a shopping bag, always careful to hide it from me at first, only revealing the contents when I casually asked where it came from. "Oh, just something I saw at the store," she'd say, her tone nonchalant, like there was nothing to question. But I couldn't ignore it. It wasn't like her. And if it was, why didn't she want me to know about it? Then there was the message history. It wasn't like I had never looked at her phone before, but now it was different. I'd catch her scrolling through it, and whenever I walked into the room, she'd quickly swipe the screen to something else or lock it. It was subtle, but it was enough to make me uneasy. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself she was just being private, maybe just working on something. But it felt off. And the night I caught her deleting messages from her inbox, I couldn't ignore that. When I asked her about it, she told me she was just clearing space. but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. The phone, the secrecy, the sudden changes, it all felt like a slow unraveling. And it wasn't just those things. Little things started slipping. Like how she would leave her laptop open and then close it immediately when I walked into the room. She would have a conversation with someone on the phone in the other room, her voice soft and hushed like she didn't want me to overhear. I could feel myself growing more paranoid by the day. Was she hiding something? Was it just my imagination? Or was I starting to notice things I had once ignored? There was also the moment when our daughter, Emma, casually mentioned something about Uncle Troy getting them ice cream one day. I froze. I had never heard of this Uncle Troy before. Was he a friend of hers? Was it someone she'd met through work? When I asked Lindsay about it, she seemed to get flustered. "Oh, Troy's just a guy from the office," she said quickly, brushing it off. "He's really nice. He's been helping me with a project." I tried to push past it, but my mind was spinning. Why haven't I heard of him before? I asked. "I don't know. I guess I didn't think it was important," she replied, her tone dismissive. "He's just a colleague. We don't need to talk about him." But why had she said it like that? Why was she so quick to shut it down? It was like I was building this case in my head. Every piece of information I gathered, every little detail, began to make sense in a way that I didn't want it to. I began piecing it all together, and the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Lindsay wasn't just pulling away from me, she was living in a different world. One I wasn't a part of. The worst part? I couldn't prove anything. There was no concrete evidence. No smoking G***N. Just these feelings, these suspicions gnawing at the back of my mind. Was I imagining things? Was I truly overreacting, or was there something real, something I needed to see that I wasn't allowed to? I couldn't get answers, but I couldn't stop asking myself questions. One night, I decided to go to bed early, hoping that sleep would give me the clarity I needed. But as I lay there, wide awake, I heard her phone buzz again. I turned over, my heart pounding in my chest, and I watched as she quietly rolled over, grabbing the phone from the nightstand. She didn't know I was awake. She didn't know I was watching. She read the message and then her face softened, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. But it wasn't just any smile. It was different. It was the same smile I used to get when she would hear something sweet from me, something private. That was when I knew for sure I had missed too many signs. Lindsay wasn't just busy or distracted. She had been hiding something, someone. Maybe it wasn't Troy. Maybe it was something else. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. The distance between us wasn't just about time. It was about trust. And when trust erodes, you're left standing on shaky ground, trying to piece together what you've lost. But I still didn't say anything. I couldn't bring myself to confront her yet. Not until I had the full picture. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was no longer living with her. I was just living alongside her. I had become a spectator in my own life. 2 weeks later, the truth came crashing down. I had told myself that I was being paranoid, that I was overreacting, but the evidence couldn't be ignored anymore. Lindsay's company was hosting an overnight retreat outside the city, a 2-day event with team-building activities, games, a banquet, and lodging. She had told me in passing that it was a closed event for employees only, that spouses weren't invited. But something didn't sit right. I had seen the official guest list. And, of course, my name was on it as the husband of one of the employees. I knew I was supposed to go even though Lindsay had insisted it was for the employees only. I wasn't going to miss out on an opportunity to be a part of it, especially when she had brushed off my concerns so easily. So I decided to show up. I couldn't just sit at home and let her keep her secrets. When I arrived at the venue, it was already dark. The informal part of the retreat had already started, a gathering of employees, music playing softly, drinks being served, and string lights flickering along the terrace. The atmosphere was light, relaxed, and carefree. I stood at the edge of the gathering, just out of sight, not wanting to reveal myself too soon. I scanned the crowd, looking for Lindsay, and there she was. I could see her in the distance, standing with a group of people. But then my stomach dropped when I saw who she was with. It was Troy. Troy. The guy from the retreat picture. The one I had seen her with feeding cake to on that photo. He was standing right next to her, laughing. Her hand was placed casually on his arm, and he had his hand on her waist. They weren't just standing next to each other, they were practically glued to each other. I felt like a wave of nausea had hit me, and my feet felt heavy as I watched them interact. Lindsay laughed at something Troy said, and I noticed the way he stroked her back lightly as they spoke. It was an asterisk mate, far more an asterisk mate than any interaction I had ever seen her have with a colleague before. The way they were standing together, the closeness they shared, it was clear that this was more than just a friendly conversation. I wanted to walk over there, confront them, make a scene, demand answers. But something stopped me. The anger, the hurt, it was too much to process in that moment. Instead, I stood there in the shadows, watching them from a distance as my mind reeled. And then, just as quickly as they had been laughing together, they disappeared inside one of the retreat's rooms. I didn't follow them. I didn't make a scene. I didn't shout, didn't storm up to them. I just turned on my heel and walked out. I left the retreat without a word, without anyone knowing I had been there. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning. I couldn't focus on anything. All I could think about was what I had just seen. There it was, right in front of me, there was no denying it now. The physical evidence, the closeness between them, the way she had disappeared with him. I had seen enough. I didn't need more proof. My worst fears had been realized, and now I knew the truth. She had been lying to me. She had been cheating on me. I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I drove to a nearby hotel and booked a room for the night. I couldn't bear the thought of facing her. I needed space to think, to process what had happened. I needed to figure out what to do next. That night, I didn't respond to her texts or calls. She asked where I was, why I hadn't come home for dinner. I didn't answer. I just lay there in that hotel room, staring at the ceiling. I didn't feel the anger I thought I would. Instead, I just felt empty. Betrayed. For the next few days, I stayed away from home. I told the kids I was away on business, giving me some time to collect my thoughts. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, what my next move was. But one thing was clear, Lindsay hadn't just betrayed me in the most mate way possible, she had also been living a double life. All the while, she had been using my support, my trust, my money, my home. And I had been the fool who didn't see it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that she hadn't just betrayed me. She had been doing it for months, maybe even years. She had hidden it from me, kept me in the dark while she built a life that excluded me. My trust in her, our family, it had all been a facade. Everything I had worked for, everything we had built was just a backdrop for her secret life. I had been a character in her story, but I wasn't the main character. She had already moved on. I spent the next few days at the hotel trying to figure out how to confront her, how to address this situation without losing my mind. I knew there would be no going back after this. Once the truth was out, there would be no way to pretend things were the same. And as much as I had once loved her, I couldn't ignore the fact that she had broken the one thing that had kept us together, trust. After 4 days of processing everything, I decided it was time to face her. I suggested that we meet at a cafe not far from the house. I didn't want to confront her in our home where emotions would run too high, where the kids would be around. The cafe seemed neutral, private. It was the right place for the conversation that needed to happen. When I met her there, she was calm, too calm. She looked at me, the same smile she always had when we were in public. It was almost like nothing had changed. Like everything was fine. But inside, I felt like my world was falling apart. I didn't beat around the bush. I didn't ask her how her day had been. I just got straight to it. I saw you with Troy, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. At the retreat. I saw you two together. I saw how close you were. And I saw you go into one of the rooms with him. There's no denying it, Lindsay. I saw everything. Her face went pale. For a moment, she said nothing. But I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she couldn't look me in the eye. Alex, She stammered, but the words didn't come out right. Finally, she just sighed and dropped her gaze to the table. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just wanted to feel wanted again. To feel seen. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My chest tightened and I had to fight the urge to shout at her. But I stayed calm. I wasn't there to fight. I was there for the truth. You chose him over me, I said quietly. You could have come to me. We could have worked through whatever you were feeling. But instead, you went behind my back. You went to him. She said nothing for a long moment, and when she finally spoke again, it wasn't an apology. It wasn't remorse. It was an explanation. I needed attention, Alex. I felt like you didn't care about me anymore. I felt like I was invisible. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I had already made up my mind. I'm done, I said softly, standing up. I can't keep living in a lie. And just like that, everything between us, our marriage, our family fell apart. The days that followed were a blur of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, but mostly, I felt empty. It was a feeling that had settled deep inside me the moment I had left that cafe. The life I had known, the family I had worked so hard to build, was all slipping through my fingers. The trust, the foundation we had, was shattered beyond repair. Lindsay didn't try to stop me when I walked out of the cafe. She didn't follow me, didn't chase after me. There was no desperate apology or pleading for forgiveness. She didn't even call or text me after that. It was like she knew, deep down, that it was over. And maybe in a way I knew it too. For the next few days I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of facing her, of being in that house with her and pretending everything was normal, felt suffocating. So I booked a room at a hotel near my office. I told the kids that I was away on business, something I had done before on several occasions. It wasn't a lie, it was just a delay. I needed the space to breathe, to think. I spent those first few nights staring at the walls of the hotel room, my thoughts spinning. The guilt and pain were suffocating, but at the same time there was an eerie clarity. I had always prided myself on being a patient, understanding person. But now I was forced to face the reality that my marriage had been a lie for longer than I cared to admit. Lindsay had been living in some version of reality where I wasn't enough for her. And she had chosen him, Troy. A man she had once called just a colleague. But the more I sat there in that hotel room, the more I realized that it wasn't just Troy that had driven a wedge between us. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything that had led up to this point, the subtle signs I had ignored, the moments when I had convinced myself that everything was fine. My pride had kept me from confronting her sooner. I had been so wrapped up in my own work, in the life we had built, that I failed to see the cracks forming beneath the surface. The messages, the deleted texts, the constant excuses. The way she had distanced herself from me, all while I kept believing that everything was fine. I had been blind. I had trusted her blindly. But now everything was laid bare in front of me and I couldn't pretend anymore. I wasn't angry at her, not at first. I was angry at myself. How had I let it go on this long? How had I missed the warning signs? How had I allowed her to pull away from me, to slip into the arms of another man without ever noticing? It wasn't just her betrayal that hurt, it was the fact that I had been complicit in my own ignorance. I had allowed her to slip away from me, to find someone else to fill the gaps I had neglected. I didn't want to go back to the house. I didn't want to see her, to have that conversation. Not yet. I needed time to figure out who I was now, outside of the role I had played as her husband. I needed to process everything, the hurt, the anger, the realization that my life had just been turned upside down. I needed space to breathe, to be away from the life I had known, if only for a while. I didn't answer her calls. I didn't respond to her texts. She must have known something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to talk to her. Every message felt like another thread tying me to a life that was now a lie. The silence between us was deafening, but it was the only way I could begin to clear my head. The next few days passed in a haze. I spent most of my time at the hotel, avoiding calls from work and anyone who might ask about the situation. I couldn't deal with anyone else's problems right now. I couldn't focus on anything other than the fact that my entire world had crumbled. And then, for days later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lindsay. "Alex, where are you? I don't know what's going on, but I can't fix this if you won't talk to me." I stared at the message for what felt like hours. Her words stung, but they also held a sense of finality. She was trying to fix it, but there was no fixing this. There was no going back. She had already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And I had been standing there, waiting, while she built a life with someone else. But I didn't respond. I knew what I needed to do next. It wasn't about fixing things. It wasn't about going back to the life we had. It was about moving forward without her. The next morning, I booked a flight back home. I wasn't sure what I was going to say to her when I walked through the door, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay away forever. I had to face her, to face the life I had built, and start making decisions about what came next. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. The kids were at school, and Lindsay was nowhere to be found. I had expected her to be waiting for me, to greet me with a tearful apology, but there was nothing. The silence was deafening. It was as if the house itself had become a reflection of the emptiness I felt inside. I walked into the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to steady them. I couldn't let her see how much this was affecting me. I couldn't let her see how much I was falling apart. And then, just as I was about to sit down and collect my thoughts, I heard the sound of the front door opening. I looked up to see Lindsay standing in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She started, but her voice cracked, and she stopped herself. "I'm sorry, Alex. I don't know what else to say." I held up my hand, cutting her off. I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't ready to listen to her apologies. Not yet. I needed to find my own peace before I could even think about forgiving her. "I can't do this right now," I said softly. my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. I need time. We need time. I can't fix this right now. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and desperation. But I couldn't give her the answers she was looking for. Not yet. I'm moving out, I said quietly. I'm going to stay with a friend for a while. I need space. And with that, I walked away. I didn't look back. The days that followed my decision to leave felt like a blur. Every morning, I woke up in that spare room at my friend's place, the weight of the situation still settling on my shoulders like a blanket of cold air. The silence that had once felt comforting in our home now felt suffocating. I had no idea how to move forward, what to say, or even where to begin rebuilding my life. I wasn't ready to talk to Lindsay, but I knew eventually I would have to face her. I couldn't keep running away from the truth, and I couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable, the conversation that would define what happened next. For days passed before Lindsay texted me again. Her messages were more frequent now, each one more desperate than the last. Alex, I need to see you. We need to talk about this. Please, let's just sit down and work through it. I hadn't responded to any of her previous messages. But this one, it hit me differently. I could feel the weight of her words, the uncertainty and remorse wrapped up in them. She was reaching out, trying to fix something that was already broken beyond repair. But the truth was, I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. I had told myself that I wouldn't give in to her pleas. I wasn't ready to forgive. Not when she had shattered everything I had ever known. But as I lay there in that room, the loneliness slowly creeping in, I realized something important. I couldn't keep running from the truth. I had to face her. I had to confront the woman who had been my partner for so long. The woman I thought I knew. The next morning, I called her. I'm coming over, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We need to talk. The phone line went silent for a moment before she spoke, her voice trembling. Alex, please. I don't even know where to start. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I couldn't bring myself to say anything else. I just hung up. When I arrived at the house later that afternoon, Lindsay was already waiting for me in the living room. The kids were at school, and the house felt strangely quiet, like a place that no longer held any of the warmth it once had. Lindsay looked different, distant, almost as if she was no longer the woman I had married. Her eyes were red from crying, and her makeup was smudged. She was sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. I couldn't read her expression. It was a mix of guilt, regret, and something else. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I didn't know what to say, she said softly, her voice hoarse. I've been trying to figure it out, but nothing feels like it's enough. I know I've ruined everything, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you, Alex. I never meant for any of this to happen. I stood at the doorway just staring at her for a moment. I didn't know what I expected, an apology, an explanation, something to make sense of what had happened. But the truth was, nothing would ever make sense to me again. I didn't sit down. I didn't walk toward her. I just stood there, my hands shoved deep in my pockets. I saw everything, Lindsay, I said quietly. I saw you with him at the retreat. I saw how close you were. And I saw you two go into one of the rooms together. There's no denying it. I know what happened. I don't need to hear excuses or apologies anymore. She looked down at her hands, tears welling up in her eyes. I know I've hurt you, she whispered. And I don't know how to make it right. But please understand, I was lonely, Alex. I was so lonely. And Troy, he understood me. I wasn't looking for this to happen. It just did. I didn't know how to stop it. The words stung, each one landing like a slap across my face. She was still trying to justify it. Still trying to make me believe that this was somehow my fault, that it was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. But it wasn't. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And she had made that choice over and over again. You didn't just betray me, Lindsay, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. You've been living a double life. You've been lying to me for months. And while I was working, providing for our family, you were out there with him, pretending everything was fine. You were living a different life without me. I wasn't living a different life, she replied softly. I was trying to make myself feel whole again. I was trying to make up for what I thought I had lost. I thought I could find something with him that I couldn't find with you. And I was wrong. I see that now. But I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to fix what was broken between us. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. She was still trying to convince me that this wasn't her fault, that somehow I had driven her to this. But I knew better. This wasn't about me. This was about her choices, her actions, her decisions. She had chosen to betray me. And there was nothing I could do to undo that. I didn't yell. I didn't get angry. I just stood there, watching her cry, watching her fall apart in front of me. I can't forgive you, Lindsay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't go back to what we had. I can't go back to the way things were. Her face crumpled and she collapsed into her hands, sobbing. But I couldn't console her. I couldn't make her feel better. Not after what she had done. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice shaking. I'm so sorry. Please, don't leave me. Don't leave us. We can work through this, Alex. We can fix it. We can fix everything. But it was too late. The trust was gone. The love was gone. And I was done. I'm not coming back, Lindsay, I said, my voice firm. I can't be the man who stays in a marriage like this. I can't stay with someone who doesn't respect me, who doesn't value me. I deserve more than this. And I'm not going to settle for a life of lies. Her tears continued to fall, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I had already given her everything I had. And now I had nothing left to give. I'm moving out, I said softly. I'm leaving. And I'm not coming back. The days after the conversation felt like an emotional tug-of-war. I moved out of the house, staying in a small apartment for a while. Lindsay insisted we keep things civil for the kids, that we should both pretend like things hadn't changed. She kept telling me that we would work through it, that time would heal everything. But I couldn't bring myself to pretend. I couldn't go back to a life where everything felt tainted. The kids were the hardest part. They didn't fully understand what was going on, but they could sense the change. Their routines had shifted. The constant presence of both parents in the home had been replaced by awkward silences and rushed visits. I tried to be as normal as possible when I saw them, taking them out on weekends and making sure to keep up with their schoolwork and activities. I didn't want them caught in the middle of our mess. Lindsay told them I was away temporarily. She kept up the illusion that I would be coming home soon. But I could see the cracks forming. They asked questions, innocent ones, like when is Daddy coming home and why don't we all eat dinner together anymore? I didn't know how to answer them. They didn't deserve this confusion, but I couldn't lie to them either. I began focusing more on myself, my career, my friends, the life that had been put on hold. The apartment was small, but it was mine. There was a certain freedom in it that I hadn't expected. I could come and go as I pleased, sleep in, eat what I wanted, and take time to reflect without constant reminders of the past. I wasn't running away, I was reclaiming my space, my peace. But there was still the guilt of leaving. Guilt that I couldn't protect my family from the pain. Guilt that my children were seeing their parents fall apart. Every time I spoke to Lindsay, she would tell me how hard the kids were taking it, how they missed having their family together. She asked me if I was sure about my decision, if there was any chance we could work things out. But I knew it was pointless. I couldn't go back to what had been broken. I couldn't pretend anymore. One day, as I sat in my apartment, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I was already moving forward, even if it didn't feel like it. It was hard, but it was the only way I could protect myself and them. After a couple of months, Lindsay began trying to reconnect. It started with messages asking how I was doing, how the kids were adjusting. Then she tried calling, leaving voicemails that sounded desperate and pleading, hoping for some kind of breakthrough. But the more she reached out, the more I distanced myself. I could hear the pain in her voice, but I was done. One afternoon, she showed up at my apartment. She stood at the door with her arms folded, looking unsure of herself. It was the first time we had seen each other face to face in weeks. I've had time to think, she said quietly. I realize everything I've done to you. And I'm sorry. I want to try again, Alex. For the kids, for us. I didn't say anything at first. The silence between us was heavy. I could feel the temptation to say something, to tell her that maybe we could work through it, that maybe time could heal all wounds. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Trust was broken. Love was tainted. There was no going back. I can't forgive you, Lindsay, I finally said, my voice calm but firm. I don't want to go back. I can't rebuild something that's been shattered. I've spent months thinking about this, and I know I'm making the right choice. You mocked me for years with your lies, and then you betrayed me. I can't forget that. She looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes, but there was a sense of understanding in her gaze. She didn't argue. She didn't plead anymore. She had known this was coming. I'm sorry, she whispered again, her voice shaking. But I get it now. I hurt you. And I've hurt myself too. I didn't know what to say. It didn't matter anymore. My choice was clear. I had chosen to walk away, to move forward and never look back. I couldn't allow myself to be the man who stayed in a broken relationship for the sake of history. The pain was real, but it was necessary for me to grow, for me to become the person I needed to be. Goodbye, Lindsay, I said softly. I hope you find peace. But it's over. And just like that, she turned and walked out of my life. After she left, I sat there for a long time, staring at the door. The finality of it all settled in. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. It was the first time in months that I felt a sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The divorce proceedings were smooth, less dramatic than I had expected. With everything that had happened, there was no fighting. We split the assets, made arrangements for the kids, and started the process of moving on. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right thing to do. As the months passed, I began to focus more on myself. I got back into my hobbies, took care of my mental and physical health, and reconnected with friends I hadn't spoken to in years. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. I was rebuilding, and for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. Lindsay tried to reach out a few times, but I ignored her calls. I knew she was sorry, but sorry wasn't enough anymore. I couldn't go back to a life that no longer existed. It wasn't about forgiveness, it was about moving forward and protecting myself from a future where I was constantly doubting everything I had once trusted. As for the kids, I made sure they knew that everything would be okay. They still missed having both parents together, but I did my best to show them that families can change and it doesn't have to mean the end of love or support. I would always be there for them, no matter what. I had made my choice. And in the end, that was the most important thing. I had chosen myself.